What is up, everybody? So glad you are here with us today at Bold Women. It is our podcast. I am Maria Weiler, and I'm here with my co-host, Maryl Wilson.
What's happening?
Come on in the room, guys. I got that one from our producer, Byron. Come on in the room.
Come on in.
Come on in. Have a seat.
Get cozy.
Get cozy. Grab a blanket and bundle up.
Let's discuss.
What are we talking about today?
Well, today we are going to talk about self-control and discipline.
Two of my favorite things. Well, one of my favorite things. I love discipline. I don't loathe self-control. I love self-control.
I struggle with both.
Yeah, it's a fruit of the spirit for a reason.
Exactly. Let's dig into it.
Let's go. Give me a shovel. Let's dig.
Yeah. All right. So something that I like to do when I'm researching stuff, go figure, as a lover of words.
Wow, I had no idea.
I like to look up like definitions of stuff, and according to the Oxford Dictionary, because I will never use Merriam or Webster.
What is your beef with them?
Well,
I feel like I've never heard anybody in my whole entire life talk about a dictionary they don't like.
I got problems with them, and I'll just go with Oxford. We can discuss another time.
My mind is so blown right now.
We can discuss over coffee. The audience does not need to hear this.
I beg to differ, but go ahead.
Okay, moving on. The definitions of self-control. Self-control is the ability to, oddly enough, control oneself. In particular, one's emotions or desires, or the expression of them in one's behavior, especially in difficult situations.
Ouch.
Now, discipline is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. And a second way of defining that can also be like a branch of knowledge, typically one studied in higher education. So like your discipline in med school could be like cardiology or something.
Oh, yeah.
So.
You know what kind of blew my mind about that when you were just reading it?
Wow.
How it says, like, you need...
What?
It says, using punishment to correct disobedience. Well, I guess, okay, never mind. It makes sense. Because I was thinking it was saying that the only way to get discipline is by punishment.
Mm.
But I missed the comma. But I saw the comma on here.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's just another way of saying mess around and find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't cross me.
A quick Google search told me that the word discipline is mentioned 169 times. The word restraint is used 43 times. The word moderation, 25 times. And the word abstain, 16 times in the Bible. So that's a total of 253 ways to essentially describe somebody, like the importance of self-control.
Which is just nuts. And I think of, like we mentioned earlier, like it's part of the fruit of the spirit. So to me, it says like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Unless I like am having some time with Jesus, like truly have that as a piece of my life. I can maybe in pieces, but
yeah,
on a consistent basis of, oh man, I need Jesus so I can have self-control.
Yeah, that's good.
How do you think people, and like looking at this as a whole, how do you think people differ in areas where they need to be self-disciplined?
Ooh, that is a really good question. How do you think people differ in the areas where they need to be self-disciplined?
Well, actually, can we bop, since we were just talking about fruit, let's bop. I'm going to bop to this other one, and then we can go back to it.
She's a bopper, you guys.
I am. I do. Well, actually today, this is kind of making me laugh. I was in between work meetings and I just stood up and started jumping because I was like, oh, I need to move. So I just jumped for a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Self-control is a fruit of the spirit. So what are the fruits of the spirit, and why do you think self-control is listed last?
She's asking the person that did not go to Bible college, and I do not have this memorized.
So it would be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, self-control. I think there's a couple different renditions. Wow. I should have put
that in the notes.
notes.
I'm like,
But,
let's see.
it's fine though. This is the reality of it.
And it's not like we're not going over this at church already.
I know we're actually in a series right now that's talking about it.
It's called The Abundant Life, and we're literally just going
talking
over the
about
fruits
this.
of the Spirit.
Love, yeah. So we have
What we got?
love, joy, generosity, kindness. Byron, can you turn the screen?
Patience, peace.
Here we go. I was having to lean. Wait for it. There's 9 of them. Here we go. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We were pretty dang close.
The old faithfulness.
The old faithfulness. Did we say gentleness?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Faithfulness.
That's what I'm looking for in a man.
A huge character of God.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks, Byron. Shout out to Byron, our producer on this. Thank you.
He does great work.
So why do you think self-control is listed last?
I would say it's probably because that's the most challenging thing. Like, if you're going to try and tackle any of those things in order to or alternatively, those things stem from having self-control. So
break that down.
I'm thinking if you have a really good sense of self-control, right? Then that means that you are somebody who is in control of their emotions. You're in control of, your ability to resist temptations and things like that. And then those, that is, I don't know, my personal opinion, I think self-control is the most important fruit of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. But I think that if you have a good sense of self-control, then all of those things are really easy to emulate, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because if you are treating your body like a temple, like you're supposed to, and you are disciplining yourself, and you are, doing, trying your best to live out your life as Christ would, then, all of those things are going to fall into place. And I think that those things stem from having a good sense of self-control. Maybe. Kind of my take. I was on a whim.
No, it's good. It makes me think of, okay, so I was looking this up, and some of why I think it's last is kind of what you're saying. I think it can tend to be one of those harder ones because we even, there's this aspect where we love ourselves. We are selfish beings. We can be just so internally focused all the time. And there's this area in James 3, but in, James 3:8, and it says, but no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil. And so basically here, this idea, and you can go read in James 3, but it's this concept of if you can control your tongue, you can basically do anything, be perfect because of how how evil our tongue can be.
If you can control your tongue, you can control your thoughts,
all of this. So I think there's this aspect of if it's just our tongue, even what other things are self-controlled focused. So our tongue, what we say, what we watch, what we allow in our ears,
what we
read, what we eat, how do we push ourselves? Do we actually take care of our physical being, all these things. So I think even just looking at the weight of if you can control your tongue, man, you can control so much. And that's just one little piece of who you are. And so I think self-control just this huge aspect of, in our world, we're told to love and adore and give ourselves everything we want, when scripture kind of tells us to die to self. And I think dying to self is a big element of self-control. So it's not just what do I do and what do I not do? It's
being able to resist the ways of the world. Yeah. And so, that's good.
Or just saying not allowing more so than can I allow so much of something, but it's the ability to know, I know I can't have that because of what happens when I do.
So then how do we get there? So brings us to, talking about discipline. You can't have, there's a lot of things There's a lot of things I think about. Gosh, I'm trying to remember one of the last times that we talked about this. And I think it had to do with my realization that I had been going to church for a little while. All right, started going back to church for a couple of years, whatever.
Was it your feral Meryl stage?
Yeah.
Okay.
I called myself the feral cat of our church because I was always the last one in, first one out. I didn't like talking to anybody. I really was just like, I was not interested in talking to people, making friends. It was just like I was like, man, I'm just like, my heart is hurting and I just need Jesus right now. Like, the last thing I want to deal with is people or try and make friends when I'm like a mess. And I want to say part of that was like when I got to a point to where I was realizing that I was being more of like a lukewarm type of person. Just in the way that it was like on the weekends, I was like going out partying. I still had friends that were, like doing drugs, sleeping around, just doing whatever they want to do, which is, that's none of my business. That's fine. I mean, they were good people, supported me through a really difficult season in my life. But then it was just kind of like I got to a point to where it was like, okay, so what now? And like, it took a long time of me sitting there being like, why am I lukewarm? What is that coming from? And like a huge part of that was realizing like I lacked some serious self-control in certain areas. And if I was allowing myself to be around people who also, whether knowingly or knowingly themselves, whether they know it about themselves or not, like they lacked self-control. So it's like, how did I expect to behave in that environment as a believer? Like if I'm just surrounding myself with people who are just like going to go do whatever. And that's fine. Cause it's fine for them. Cause it's like, they didn't have like the same convictions that I do. So they weren't like trying to, improve their relationship with God. Like none of them were like going to church or anything like that. So, I was just like, man, I really need to sort this out because I'm literally being the person that is like reviled. Like that is like the one type of person that's like just abhorrent in the Bible. It's like, no, you're like, this is just be one way or another, like, or just get out of my face kind of thing. Like that's how God views, people who are lukewarm. You be on one side of the fence or the other, like make a decision and go do it. Like just, don't sit here and pretend and be like half-hearted about everything. So that was something that was like a big realization that I had. I was like, man, like I had started disciplining myself in certain areas. It was like, even though I was going out and partying, it was like, didn't matter if I was hungover or what I was even doing up until a couple hours before church. Like I was going to church. I didn't care how that was going to happen. It was like, that was just like,
she gonna be there.
Had to do it. And then like one of the other things was just like, I had started working out. And so that was one of the things too, like that was like a really big, like that was a huge, like changing factor, after I got divorced and everything was, it started after my divorce, but it was right around that time where I'd like signed up for a 5K on Thanksgiving. Cause who does that?
You do.
My brother and his wife.
Meryl 2.0.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of started some things where it was just like, when I was going through my divorce and I was having these kinds of realizations, it was like one of the things that stuck out in my head was just like, you can't do things the way that you used to. Yeah. And then when I got to that point where I realized that I was the lukewarm person, like that phrase came back into my mind. It was like, you're literally doing what you're
everything
resorting
the
to
same
things
way.
you're resorting to things that you're used to doing. And I was like, oh crap. Like I really am. I am doing that. Like, wow. And that was a tough realization. So then it was like, okay, now I have to like figure out how I'm going to get some self-control. And then it was just like, you have to start removing things. And that's what that looks like sometimes for some people, is removing people, removing yourself from certain situations, putting boundaries in place for yourself and relationships that you have with other people.
I think as much as removing too, it's not just removing and like leaving it empty. It's removing and making sure you add and fill in.
Yes. That's good. That's
Like,
good.
so it's like, hey, I might know like this group of people is actually not super great for me to be around all the time, but who is? Like, who are some people that are going to be around that can help keep me accountable, that can help point me to right directions, that like you, okay, what's the phrase where it's like you become what you surround yourself with? Or I just got done reading Jackie Hill Perry's book, Holier Than Thou. It's incredible. Highly recommend it. But like basically the thought behind the whole book is like what you behold, you become. And so like what I surround myself with, what I constantly look at, what I am around,
what I prioritize,
I will become. And so, in the book, it basically talks about like when you spend time, which is like God, who's so holy, like that's how we become holy, is just by beholding him. But like, who do I allow around in my life and what do they do? So I think accountability is a huge aspect of, even though it's like self-control and discipline, I think a lot of big chunk of that comes with accountability too. Cause I can think of, if like some patterns and habits that are good to have, if you were to stop doing them, you probably have people in your life now that would be like, you good, Meryl? Like, what's up? What's going on?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I think there's this piece too where like discipline, what is Alex Hewley? Shout out to Alex Hewley. He was preaching on discipline one time and he was talking about how, basically looking at what do I want most over what do I want now. So like if I'm in this moment and I need self-control and I need to have some discipline in it and I'm getting to a spot where I need to make a decision and I'm being torn and I'm being pulled. It's this moment of like, do I want something else over what I want now? Like, do I want a closer relationship with Jesus? Is this going to pull me further away? Yeah. Do I want a healthier life? Do I want a better marriage? What do I want in the long run? That am I willing to sacrifice now for something that seems to be what I want in short?
Yeah, that's good.
He worded it way more eloquently than I just did, but it was great.
Do you think that, with that being said, what does it look like or I guess what would you call it for lack of a better term, because it's like blanking. It's making me blank right now, but like thinking about somebody who has too much self-restraint, too much self-control, where they're like, you know what I'm talking about, like where it's like unhealthy, that you're just like not allowing yourself to do anything. And why that can be a problem.
I think there's this ultimate aspect where like self-control becomes an idol, or this like idol of self in that particular situation, where if something's not the way that I want it, if it's not exactly what in the perfect way, and I'm saying this being like, I like things in their right place. Everything has its place. I love everything clean. I just like, I'm saying that coming from this kind of person. But like, I think when it is too much, it gets to this spot of where you feel like you actually have control, and control's an illusion.
Yeah.
And this element of, how do I word this way? Like, you are not God. And sometimes I think when we get in those extreme cases where, and I think some of it's defensive too, like if I can keep everything controlled, I think there's some deeper wounds that kind of come in that, with like, if I can keep everything controlled and it's all in mine and I have it and I'm spinning 20 different plates at one time and I got it and I can spin all these plates, and obviously it's going to work out, but really it's like,
that is exactly,
it's about to crumble.
Yeah. That's exactly making me think of, a conversation that you and I had about, like when I am one of 6 kids in my family. I'm number 5 out of 6. And I have always been known in my family as like the level-headed child. My parents have told me over and over, in a complimentary way, of course, but I probably took it not probably. I definitely did take it to the extreme. I did. But they would always just say like, we never have to worry about you. Like, we know that you're mature, you make good decisions, and, it's funny that you were saying that, like, people can make themselves like into an idol. I didn't realize that's what I was doing with myself, because it was like I was putting myself on this pedestal of like, I make good decisions, I'm smart, I'm level-headed because I've been told this my whole life. And not that that's a bad thing, but I took it the wrong way. And then I made it into something where it was like, okay, cool. So I'm going to decide what I'm going to do. So I'm going to move somewhere without consulting anybody because I'm smart. I make decisions. I do my research. And a huge part of, like, one of the things that had to just like really get torn down for me, just as my marriage fell apart, it was basically like my entire life fell apart. So it was a whole lot of things that just came like crashing down. But like one of the things was that where like I had this whole facade that I didn't really realize that I was hiding behind. Like I just had this like appearance of somebody who was very like composed, and I always had my stuff together. Like I always made sure that people thought, or like that's always something that I've gotten complimented on, is people have always said like, yeah, you're always like put together. Yeah, you've got your stuff together. And yeah, I do, but it was just like not in the sense that it is honoring God or in a way that was like actually benefiting me, really.
Yeah.
So I was really only just like limiting myself by doing that.
I think there's an element where we can feel complete, or like this, almost like a pride in, look what all that I did. And not that that's a bad thing. Like it's good to be like proud of stuff that you did, to like push yourself to try new things and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, I did that. Like,
yeah, but it's pretty darn arrogant to be thinking,
but it can,
like
it can flip real quick of like, I did that. And like, I didn't need anybody's help. And all of a sudden it's like, well, you had the grace of God, if anything.
I look back and I think about, I mean, we're going to talk about this at another point, but I mean, I look back on my life and think, yeah, see, I made all these things happen for myself. And then there's specific things and times that I have seen where like God has protected me from something, or he, got me out of a lot of trouble. Like,
yeah,
there was a lot. Like in high school, for example, like my parents always thought I was just like this good, even-keeled kid, right? And for the most part I was, but it was just like I had siblings that were older. Some of them got in a lot of trouble. Some of them got in a little bit of trouble. I observed the ways in which that they got in trouble and decided, okay, how can I do what they're doing but not get the same results that
not
they did?
Get in trouble.
And so I'd be like, yeah, I'm going over to this friend's house and I'm going to stay the night. And it was like, yeah, cool. Her mom is letting us. You can call her mom if you want to. And on occasion, my mom would call the other mom, and the other mom would be like, yeah, they're staying the night. But like come 8 p.m., we're heading out to somebody's house and going to drink and
Backroads,
smoke
Iowa.
weed and do whatever. Like, so till the cows come home and then drive. So yeah. So it was just, I just found and that definitely became a prideful thing, because I was always like, well, I got it together. Like,
Yeah.
I'm super smart.
What do you think people get so afraid of in creating new disciplines?
Ugh.
Because sometimes I think that there's this honest, like fear of change too. Like, because we are such creatures of habit.
I think part of it involves like having to take an honest look at yourself.
Yeah.
And having to call
Very
out
true.
some things that you don't like. Some things that that you're doing that you don't necessarily like, but you're not ready to really talk about it.
Yeah. Or like, what do I have to give up that I love?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be like, we're talking about this right now in one of our ladies groups at church, but just idea of like, well, we're talking about it in regards to like food. We're going through the book Made to Crave, and just this idea of like, thinking of
shout outs.
I know, right? Just thinking about like this aspect of like, oh, I know this particular food isn't good for me, but I love it so much. So just thinking I don't get to have it as long again, or I shouldn't have it for a really long time. Like, oh, that makes me sad. And just being like how we can, like, there's this aspect of like denying self, where it's like we can feel sad, and I sometimes think we don't like to feel the negative emotions, so we kind of try to stay away from feeling those sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like when you were asking that question, what I was thinking about was like having to take an honest look at myself in terms of why I didn't want to work out, why the times that I would work out, it would just be like, it'd be like once a month, maybe once every couple of months. And then I'd do something stupid like not stretch, and I'd pull my hamstring and, be out for a few weeks and then not go back, or, wear the wrong shoes and I would get plantar fasciitis on the treadmill, and there's just stupid stuff like that. But then I would allow that to just keep me away from working out or whatever. And then there was also just like the harder stuff that I didn't want to look at, which would be like my ex just being like, you should probably go to the gym. Like, just like, and not say anything else other than like, you need to go to the gym. Yeah. With that look. You know what look I'm talking about.
You know what look you're talking about.
And it would be like that, or it would just be yeah, it'd just be like a stupid, like it would make me feel stupid, like, yeah, well, I'm not going to go now because I know that you're just being mean about it or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then I would go and like have freaking fast food for dinner every night because he had a terrible diet. So I allowed myself to have a terrible diet. Mm-hmm. And like, I was just stuck in all of that because my self-worth and self-image and everything was just in the gutter pretty much. So it was.
Do you think lack of self-discipline is tied to lack of self-worth? Oh my gosh, my tongue. Lack of oh my gosh. Whoa. Lack of self-discipline, is it tied to lack of self-love, basically?
Can be.
Yeah.
I think it could be. I don't think that's the case for everyone, because it's, after I started making some changes, like it's hard to explain when you're trying to tell somebody, like, it's a mindset shift. And that's it feels like a cliche thing to tell somebody mm-hmm. who has been struggling with like trying to be consistent with something, or they're trying to discipline themselves with either their diet or their finances or their relational boundaries with people or whatever.
It could be an array of things.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, a mindset shift doesn't like help anybody to say that. But at the same time, it's like that is what helped. Mm-hmm. Like I had to start looking at things differently. And like once you take the time to like really dig in and look at the stuff that you don't want to look at and all of that, and then go, okay, well, what do I need to change about this? Like what needs to change here? And what's that going to look like for me? And like what's keeping me from doing that? And then, one of the things that I had heard that kind of stuck with me, well, other than just like, being led by the Lord, that was like, you can't keep doing things the way that you're doing them. Mm-hmm. And like, that was just one of the biggest, like I woke up, I don't know if I woke up or if I was just up really late or something, but it was just like out of nowhere. It was just like, you can't keep doing things the way that you're doing them. Mm. And you can't keep doing them. You just can't. You can't go forward doing things the way that you're doing it.
You can't.
I was like, okay, so that was something, but that helped shift my perspective. And then I heard somebody say something, somebody wiser that probably gets paid a lot of money said something like, we prioritize what's important to us. And it's like, if being around to meet your grandchildren is important to you, then you're going to make efforts to change things. Mm-hmm. Or if it's important to you, to break like a generational bond of, man, you name it, divorce, for example, then you've got to look at the way that you view dating, marriage, everything differently than what you've grown up knowing about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
takes that shift, I guess.
No, it's good. I think, or, looking at that, what do you think are the big ways, like when in self, that someone's like, what's a good way to be like, hey, I'm I'm feeling like I should make a shift. Okay, I'm going to rephrase my question again because it just came to me. What is like not, I'm going to use the word red flag, but not as red flag, but like what's something that's internal you think that people can notice as like, oh, this is a flag that I should probably create some disciplines here. What do you think are some of those like flags?
Gosh, that's a good question. Usually, fear. Like if something scares you, like you have a health scare, that's going to freak people out and that's going to make them change things. You get in a car accident where like you sustain some serious injuries and then you come out the other side of it and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I need to do things differently. I think that's that can be a driver. Yeah. That can also be something that can like keep you even further into, practicing things that aren't good for you or whatever. Yeah. What do you think?
Gosh, I think the spots where you feel, I want to say like you feel like you don't have control, but where you feel like you kind of just binge out. That could be food. That could be
where you want to like numb.
Where you just want to like numb with something. Where it's like, okay, this is being used as a crutch. So I think like identifying what are crutches for you. And it could be, honestly, like working out can be a crutch for people too. Like there's some people that might need to press pause on it because like they're using that as a crutch for something. And I think the big overarching thing about, especially being a believer, for those of you who are listening who are believers and following Christ, is there's this thing that God just wants us to live very balanced lives. And I think that's the point of this self-discipline, this self-control, is where he wants us to be balanced. Like where I know you can hear from time to time Christianity or like walking the life of Jesus and in his will and his ways is like a road and there's ditches and you don't want to be on either side of the ditches because you can take something and go and run off with it and you get way in a ditch and you're not balanced. So you, and like even looking at when, was it? No, this is going to be bad, guys. I went to Bible school, but I can't remember who saw the white sheet with all the animals on it. What? When God was like, hey, go ahead and eat. It was Peter? Okay, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I swear it was Peter.
Wow, I'm not recalling that story. Okay.
So basically, this is like when God's kind of saying to Peter, hey, all these animals are okay to eat now, because at the prior, anyone in like who would have been part of covenant wouldn't have eaten pork. You wouldn't have eaten
discussion on
clean and unclean.
Okay, yeah.
So, and he had to like show him that multiple times because it was so like a God, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And God is like, Peter, don't call dirty what I've made clean. And so I think that's a really beautiful picture of like what it looks like to live in balance of like, first off, it's not about us anyways, but this idea of like, we can take things too extreme as well. And I think the far side of when something's extreme is, has it become a God in your life? Do you run to that first? Do I run to, and this is, I'm throwing up both hands of like, I've been an emotional eater in my life. Like, do I run to food when I'm feeling a certain way before I run to God with it? Do I run to the gym first? I love to go to the gym. It's one of my favorite things to do. Do I run to that out of getting self-worth of knowing like, oh, I'm making myself better? Or do I when I'm feeling kind of low of like, hey God, I need you to come into this. Like, where do I go to first? Yeah. So I think that would be a big flag as far as, am I running to something other than God? I got to put some other balance and boundaries up in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. That was making me think of like, oh man, one night, I won't get into details, but I do recall a specific evening where it was just like, I hadn't completely changed some things in my life yet. It was before I had realized that I was like being a lukewarm. And I was thinking about, there was just a night that I was going out with a friend, and I honestly I don't know what it was that triggered this thought in my mind, but I was like, I'm going to hit the self-destruct button tonight. And by golly, did I. By golly, did I.
Destruction.
Went out and got super wasted, found myself in somebody's home, and the next day I was like, oh, wow, what did I do?
Destruction accomplished.
Yeah, definitely don't know how that happened, but, I knew how it happened, because it was just like, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. It's like, if you don't want to address like the deeper issues, if you don't want to address like the root cause of why you're doing destructive things to yourself in the first place, then,
right.
I mean, we're talking about like food and exercise and stuff, and that's just a very easy example, but it's like, there's people who have like serious spending problems, or, they run to that because they place sentimental value on physical things that they can purchase because they've had some kind of financial insecurity, or they've always been financially insecure like their whole lives. And it's always been a really like scary thing, because if you grew up going like, I don't know where my next meal's coming from, or I don't know if the bills are going to get paid this month,
or the dopamine hit. Like there's like so much research out there too of like in our brains, when like those vices, literally, like you could list all the things that you're listening to or listing, that like we literally get dopamine releases in our brain. So we run to it out of like, I think, and especially with our social media world, we're constantly chasing dopamine. If I'm going to be real honest, I think that's a big thing for us.
Yeah, I agree. It's much easier than trying to heal yourself.
It's much easier to be doped up
and live a balanced life.
And live a balanced life.
You're talking about. So
makes me think of the balance beam, which, okay, guys, I'm 6 foot tall. And if you know gymnasts, they are not tall. They are like itty bitty. And I got put in gymnastics when I was younger. And okay, that add on to my lack of depth perception, balance beam was not the best for me. So I'm just going to leave that there. But I would not recommend putting your incredibly tall daughter in gymnastics. But I just remember everybody would have to like jump up to grab the bars, and I would just reach up and grab them. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like swing here, but my feet are on the ground. It's fine. You mentioned balance, and I thought of the balance beam. What do you think? Okay. Well, how would you encourage someone who like struggles in staying consistent?
If you're trying to learn anything new, what do you do?
Baby steps.
And
repetition.
Exactly. Over and over and over and over again in tiny amounts. That's all it takes. We've talked about this so much, because I'm also somebody who really enjoys working out and staying in good physical shape. But you get people that get so extreme. They want to go really hard, really fast, because they think that if they lift super heavy, they got to do that right out the gate, and they've got to exert all of their energy their first couple of workouts or something like that. And of course, then what happens is you get super sore, your recovery is not great, and then you're discouraged and you don't want to go back. And so you don't. So then the next thing you know, you've had a gym membership for 3 years and you've been 4 times.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of thing that happens. But something that I learned, I don't even know how I did this, but it was like, so I got divorced. I had moved into an apartment, and then it was just like, after all of that stuff sort of settled down a little bit, it was like everything shut down with the pandemic. So I was like,
what am I going to do with my time?
What am I going to do now? So then it was like, okay, here's my options. Like I, can't go to the gym. The fitness center at my apartment was open for a little bit, and then they closed it down. But I had a parking garage. I had a perfectly stable floor in my apartment. And I was like, cool, I'm going to learn how to do push-ups. And so I would text my brother and be like, how do I do that? He'd be like, just try and do one. That's all you have to do. Doesn't matter if you get halfway down. Just try and do one. Try and do it a couple times a day. And then each time that you try and do it, try and do more than what you did the first time. And when I would walk up to the top of like my parking garage. At the time, I was in a newer apartment complex, and it was only about half full. So it was really,
Awesome.
really nice. It was very quiet, and I could just get up there, and I wasn't like really too worried about much. But it was just, okay, I can do like 30 minutes. And it was like, run for a little bit, then walk some. Like, just, it wasn't anything like super groundbreaking. It was just, I got to do this, and I got to do it 6 days a week. And I just got it in my head, like, you have to do it 6 days a week, because I had read somewhere that it's like, if you want to create a habit, you have to do something consistently for 2 weeks. Well, for me, it was more like 4 weeks, because I was ready to call it good after a couple weeks. I was like, fine. This sucks. I don't want to do this. But then it was like, no, just keep going. And 30 minutes, and like something I had told myself, I was like, if you can't dedicate 30 minutes, then you've got bigger problems. And we just need to deal with this right now, because everything else in the world's crazy and you can't go do anything anyway. So
Yeah.
time to just do it. And so that's what I would say is, like, as you said, baby steps, tiny little improvements, multiple times, repetition.
There is one of the best books that I've read. I'm looking up the guy's last name. I want to make sure I say it right. Yeah, that's
Can't wait.
BJ Fogg, Fogg. He's out of Stanford University. He's a professor out there. Well, he's an adjunct professor per Google. But he wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And I think Atomic Habits references this book, and it's more about like his principles and like his way about it. But one of my favorite stories in it is he talked about how he wanted to be a flosser. He wanted to floss his teeth. And like, that was just like something he wanted to do. But he's like, I never floss my teeth. And it was a habit that I wanted to build. So he's like, I started with flossing one. He's like, call me crazy. You're going to think like, oh my gosh, BJ, like, you get in there, you floss a tooth. What is that even going to do? But he's like, lo and behold, he's like, it's been 20 years and I fully floss my teeth every night because of what, like, just the tiny repetition of, he's like, then sometimes I'd be like, okay, I'll do two. Like, I'm in here, I might as well do two. But just that constant, the constant little things. Yeah. And I think it goes so much back to even deeper level of that. I really believe that God is a progress God. And
absolutely, you've said that to me a couple times.
That there is so much that he doesn't just change us. I mean, once we accept Jesus, our inside is changed, right? Like our spirit becomes new. But this whole process of our soul, our mind, will, and emotions, and our body changing, and like realizing like this thing that I'm living in is not mine. It belongs to Christ. How I treat this thing and how I live matters. That takes time. And that's why scripture says we have to renew our mind and we have to constantly change things. And there's so much that we learn in the miracle that happens. Like, sometimes I think we don't look at miracles in progress, but like miracles do happen in progress.
Yeah.
And
he cares more about like watching your character develop over time.
Yeah.
Because if you are developing your character, or you're developing a discipline in a certain area, then those are things that you are likely not going to depart from.
Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense, because as you pursue a relationship with Christ, that's exactly what he wants. Yeah. He wants your heart to change slowly over time at the pace that you need it to be at.
Well, and I was talking with someone one time, and I just thought it was so good. And they're just like, you think about like your relationship with God, like an actual relationship with a person, right? Like, cause he is. Yeah. And how your relationship with people grow, and how you get to know each other. And the more you get to know each other, the more you love each other. And that it takes time. And then he can sweep you away with his love and you fall head over heels. But then just as you spend time with him, and I think going back to the self-control and self-discipline aspect, you asked me earlier, like, can people have too much? And I think a really, really great example of that is the story of Martha and Mary.
Oh, yeah.
And I am a recovering Martha through and through. And we were at a basketball game one time, and one of our friends said, like, oh, what Bible character do you relate most to? And like, people are usually like, or Meryl, you even say to you, like, you're like, I'm Peter.
Well, I said that. I said Peter, but then I also said, I mean, mine are depressing. Like, I said Peter, and then I was like, but also Jonah. Like, I understand. Like, I feel like Jonah. I can relate to Jonah on another level.
Like, so many levels. But I remember mine was like, Martha. And they were like, Martha? I'm like, yeah, her. Me and her. But yeah, this idea of like, if everything, and I say that too, like coming out of like, I love feeling like control, like everything in its place and spot, but just like where it's too much is where I no longer see Jesus, and where Jesus is sitting there, he's coming to their home and she is so consumed with getting everything exact that she misses the chance to just sit at the feet of Jesus. And so I think that could be kind of this big determining factor of, is it taking me away from being willing to sit at the feet of Jesus? Is a good determining factor of, could it be too much?
So good.
But on the flip side too, is it, the extreme side, is it keeping me from like not wanting to stop and spend time? And on the not to say the lazy side, but the lack of doing something, is it I don't want to invest time with Jesus, my Savior, like, because I'm so into that. Just something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that's good.
My 2 cents that nobody asked for.
We asked
for it.
I mean, we're here. We're on this podcast. So yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today.
Welcome, talking about discipline and self-control.
Yeah. Well, be sure to check out our website at www.boldco.studio, where you can learn more about us, or you can stream episodes if you don't have oh my gosh,
you're becoming like me. Welcome.
Our website is where you can learn more about us, or you can stream episodes if you don't have a preferred platform that you use already. You can email us with your thoughts, questions, comments, or if you have suggestions for topics for us to discuss at info@boldco.studio. Be sure to like and rate us on whatever streaming platform you found us on. And finally, give us a follow on Twitter at @boldwomenco. And then we are on Instagram at boldwomen.podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Check it out. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a different word in it.
Wherever you are, have a great day.
Have a great day.
Or night. Or morning. Whichever
we love
it
y'all.
is.
Bye.
Bye.